Hi everyone, Amy here. Welcome to episode 3 of my Crime Time series. Tonight's episode is going to be on Lizzie Borden. And I think growing up, we all heard the famous rhyme, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. And when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Now there are a few problems with that, and one is it was not her mother who was murdered, it was her stepmother. Another problem with that is it wasn't an axe, but a hatchet, probably not unlike this one. And another is they believe that the stepmother received 18 or 19 blows, and the father received about 11. Now, this does not make the murders any less gruesome or horrific. I remember this case really haunted me as a kid. I'm a very visual person, so I just couldn't imagine the sheer brutality of a crime like this, and murdering your parent and your step parent. And then you can see the picture of Lizzie behind me, and it's a little haunting. Back then, people were told not to smile in pictures because the photography equipment was not sophisticated enough to capture motion. If someone moved, then it would destroy and blur the whole picture. And they found that it was harder for people to hold a smile longer than just a straight face. So just all of that combined really creeped me out. And so I decided to do a video about her. And so in tonight's episode, I'm going to present you with the facts of the case, a little bit of the background, and then I'm going to tell you whether I think she was guilty or not. So let me go to my notes, as I always have these up. Can't remember everything. So Lizzie was born in Fall River, Massachusetts, July 19th, which is coming up. Her birthday is coming up, 1860, and she died June 1st, 1927. She was born to Andrew Borden and Sarah Borden. She had an older sister, Emma, who was 10 years older than she was, and sadly, they lost a sibling, I believe, as an infant. And then sadly, Lizzie's biological mother, Sarah, died when Lizzie was only 3. 3 years later, her father, Andrew, married an Abby Borden, and that was in 1866. Now, there were rumors that Abby only married Andrew for his money, and he married her just so that he would have someone to take care of the girls and to kind of help keep house. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the father, Andrew. He was a very wealthy man at the time of his death. He was, it was estimated that he was worth, in today's money, about $9 million. And he started out manufacturing and selling furniture, and oddly enough, including caskets. And he also invested in real estate. He was a successful property developer. He was a director of several textile mills and owned considerable commercial property. He was also president of the Union Savings Bank and a director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. But even though he was very wealthy, probably one of the wealthiest men in Fall River, Massachusetts, he was also very frugal. So much so that the house they lived in was, they said it was pretty small, but I actually thought it was kind of big looking at the blueprints and everything. But I guess for his wealth, it was considered small. He actually turned a two-tenant house into a house for them. And he was so frugal, there was no indoor plumbing, no running water, no electricity. They said he was so frugal he refused to let food be thrown out. So they would often eat spoiled food. And, I guess food poisoning was not uncommon back then because people didn't necessarily know the right ways to keep and preserve food. Um, they said that he was not the nicest man, that he was very controlling. He had a lot of enemies. He didn't really believe in the arts, which apparently Lizzie loved, and he wouldn't really allow them in the house. In fact, it was a very strange house because there were no hallways. Um, just one room led into another, and they always kept, all the locks locked, which I thought was they always specified that in like every article I read that they were very big on keeping their doors locked. But then again, they said that he had many enemies, and Lizzie had confessed to one of her friends that she was afraid that something was going to happen to her father. Um, so he was very frugal, and contrary to what I thought about Lizzie, I thought that she was very quiet, very withdrawn, a recluse, but apparently that was not the case. She was actually very social, outgoing. She taught Sunday school. She was involved in nonprofit charities. So she was very outgoing and social. And kind of unlike her older sister Emma, they said that she was quieter and more of a homebody. But apparently Lizzie really wanted to live a better lifestyle, kind of like the heiress lifestyle. Because the house where they lived, like I said, I guess was considered small for their wealth. It was in a very busy area, very close to the central business district. So it was very kind of noisy and just right there out in the open. And Lizzie wanted to live in a place called the Hill, which was, a much wealthier, very, nice area. So they believe that Lizzie really resented her father for that. Um, so, um, and as far as the stepmother goes, they said there was kind of a lot of animosity, especially between Lizzie and Abby. A lot of people would call her, call Abby Lizzie's mother, and Lizzie would very coldly, uh, correct them and say, she's not my mother, she's my stepmother. And apparently she even corrected them after the murders. So there was a lot of resentment. About a year before the murders took place, Lizzie had gone into Andrew and Abby's bedroom and had taken jewelry and some money. And even though everybody knew that it was Lizzie, they still called the police. I don't believe anything happened, but after that, the resentment between uh, Lizzie and her stepmother grew, as well as I think between the sister and the stepmother, and they began to refer to the stepmother as Mrs. Borden. So it wasn't necessarily a happy household. And they also had a maid by the name of Bridget, who took care of the house, and they actually called her Maggie. Um, so, like I said, it wasn't necessarily a happy household. And trying to look at my notes because inevitably I'll forget something. In fact, I forgot to start recording a little bit ago, and I was halfway through my video when I realized I hadn't hit the start recording. So I'm going to try not to forget anything this time. I just want to give you a little background on Andrew and Abby, and before I get to the murders. So the day before the murders, everybody came down with food poisoning, or the symptoms of food poisoning, and they thought that it was from bad mutton stew that had been left on the stove. But then Abby thought that it could have been poisoned milk. The one of the interesting things is Lizzie did not have breakfast downstairs with the family that morning. She ate upstairs in her room, which wasn't really uncommon for her to do. She was kind of distancing herself, I think, from her father and stepmother. But even though she said that she had been sick too from, with food poisoning, nobody could really confirm that. And then prior to the murders, she had tried to go to the local drugstore and purchase prussic acid, which is hydrogen cyanide. Very, very nasty, a very nasty chemical. It was originally created as an insecticide. It was also used to murder or to kill cattle, and it was also used by Hitler in the concentration camps to kill people. So it's an absolutely horrific chemical, and she said that she wanted to use it to clean or repair a sealskin cape, but the clerk said, that wasn't a use for it. So he wouldn't sell it to her because you needed a doctor's prescription for it. So I mean, I think that was very damning that she had tried to purchase poison before, and then I really wondered too if she hadn't been trying to poison them all along. For one, after the murders, her doctor prescribed a double dose of morphine for her. She was so supposedly distraught, and she was having her monthly woman issues. And that may sound strange that the doctor prescribed, morphine, but back then they didn't know it was addictive, and it was used as an elixir for everything. It was, supposed to cure all of your ails. They even gave it to children. Oh, one thing I wanted to do, I kind of forgot to do this before too. Wanted to show you a few pictures of everybody. Let's see, I am just going to put them up here. It's the first time I've tried to show pictures this way, so bear with me. So obviously there's a picture of, behind me of Lizzie. There's a picture of her father, Andrew. Picture of her stepmother, Abby. A picture of her older sister, Emma. And a picture of the maid, Bridget. I feel like going through this is kind of like a game of Clue, showing you all the important people and the possible suspects. And speaking of suspects, it was also said that Andrew may have had an illegitimate son by the name of William, who may have wanted to stake his claim, in his father's inheritance. But I couldn't find anything that backed that up. It seemed like every article that I read had conflicting information on it. So it was kind of difficult sometimes to discern fact from fiction. But there is no doubt that, someone wanted the Bordens dead. So back to the morphine, I did some research on morphine, and I found out that, for instance, if you take too much of it, you can actually have gastrointestinal symptoms, not unlike food poisoning. I also read that with long-term use, it can cause aggression. And like I said, they didn't realize that it was addictive. So sadly, in today's time, we have an opioid epidemic. Well, back then, they also had, an opioid epidemic. And like I said, long-term use of morphine can cause aggression, which is interesting because Lizzie's great aunt, Eliza Darling Borden, great aunt by marriage, in 1848, she murdered two of her three children by throwing them into the cistern well that was in the basement of their house, which I believe was next door to where Lizzie came to live. And then she also, the great aunt also committed suicide after she murdered two of her three children. Now, they said that she was suffering from postpartum depression, but I really wonder, since, the use of morphine, the use of cocaine, and, other drugs were so prevalent in Victorian times, that I wonder how much of their personalities and their behavior could have been shaped by the drug use. And in fact, they said that, after the murders, Lizzie was very unemotional, and they said that that could have been because of the morphine. But again, I just, it just makes me wonder, with the prevalent use of drugs back then, drugs that, um, were given so freely, and probably, I'm sure that wasn't the first time Lizzie had, been given morphine. It just, like I said, makes me wonder how much of the personality or behavior of people back then could have been shaped by drugs. So, in fact, here is a picture of an ad back then, of one of the medicines that contained morphine. And as I said, they even gave it to babies. So, oh, and here is a picture of the Borden house. Oops. Back then. And, they considered this a small house. And I guess, maybe it was, small compared to, what Andrew could have afforded for his family. But I was going to show you the blueprints of the house, but I don't really think that's necessary. So I will just tell you, there was a basement or cellar. There was the first floor, the second floor, and then the third floor was the attic, and that's where the maid slept. So again, I said there were no hallways; just one room led into another. I want to make sure I have read all of the important background information for you before I get to the actual day of the murder. As well, the day before the murder, Andrew's brother-in-law was visiting, and he stayed over. In fact, Abby was actually in the guest room on the second floor, putting new sheets on the bed when she was murdered, they think. And John left the morning of the murders, and his alibi was that he was on a train, and he was seated with 4 or 5 priests. And they did have someone who was on the train as well, who was able to attest to the fact that he did remember seeing several priests. So he was ruled out as a suspect. Another suspect in the case, again, I said, was the possible illegitimate son, but I was never able to find any information on him. I'm not even sure he really did exist. And on the morning of the murders, Andrew went out to do some of his daily business. He was still feeling a little under the weather, as well as the maid. And they said that she may have resented being told to go outside in the heat and wash windows. She did that in the morning. And Lizzie said that during the course of the morning that her stepmother received a note about a sick friend and had gone out. The note was never found. Lizzie said that she heard her return home at some other point in time later on. So we don't believe that Abby really ever left the house. But Bridget was in the house at the time of the murders, or she was home. There were theories that Andrew could have had relations with the maid against her will, but I don't really think that was factual, and I don't think that was based on any reality. It was in a movie that I began watching on Lizzie Borden the other night. There were also theories that Bridget and Lizzie may have had a relationship, and Abby had found out and was upset. But again, there was really nothing to support that. And later on, Bridget did end up getting married to a man. Not that that means anything, but I don't know that there was anything to substantiate those claims of her and Lizzie having a relationship. Then there was another theory that Andrew was sexually abusing Lizzie, and that she committed the murders in a fugue state and could not remember. I don't know that this was based on anything either factual, and I think it would have been very difficult for him to do that because, like I said, there were no hallways in the house. One room led into another. You had Andrew living there. You had Abby living there. You had the older sister Emma. You had Lizzie living there, and you had Bridget the maid. So I'm not saying it was impossible, but I think it would have been difficult. Although there were, several floors. Now, Lizzie claims that the day of the murder, she was in the barn looking for iron for sinkers to go fishing on the following Monday. But her testimony changed, and sometimes she would say she was in the barn, and other times she said that she was near the barn eating pears from a tree. And again, they said that it was possible she was confused by the morphine, or she was confused because she was lying. So around 11 o'clock in the morning, Andrew returned home, and he had been locked out of the house. which I thought was kind of interesting. I thought that may have been a ploy by possibly Lizzie to, um, stage that so she would know exactly when he arrived home because someone would have to let him in. And so Bridget the maid ended up having to let him into the house. And Bridget reports that she heard giggling coming from the staircase, and she thinks it was Lizzie. And so a little after 11, Andrew Borden, in the sitting room on the first floor, he decides to take a nap on the couch. And about the same time, Bridget the maid decides to go take a nap um, in her third third story room. Shortly after that, Bridget is awoken by Lizzie. Lizzie tells her that someone has murdered her father. And so she tells Bridget to go fetch a doctor and go fetch her friend Alice. And I need to refer to my notes. I'm doing a decent job remembering this, but I can never remember who exactly found Abby. Okay, it was the I believe a neighbor, Adelaide, and Bridget the maid. They went upstairs and they found Abby after they came back with the doctor and Lizzie's friend Alice. So um, Abby Borden was found on the second floor, like I said, in the guest room where she had been changing the sheets from when Andrew's brother-in-law had stayed. And she was found, well, actually, I'm going to break out my little props. Um, my interest in miniatures has been renewed, especially from my last crime video about Frances Glessner Lee, the mother of forensic science, who made miniature dioramas, crime scene dioramas, to help train local law enforcement and helping them investigate murders or death investigations. So I made little dioramas of the crime scenes in the Lizzie Borden case. So I'm going to tell you now, I didn't do like a perfect job. I am not a carpenter. This is not my thing. Don't ever ask me to build a house or anything. Um, but I really wanted to make these little props. Um, so this is, let's see if you can, well, you can see that. This is a replica of the second story guest room where Abby Borden was found. So, not very good at pointing at doing this with the camera here, but I tried to um, kind of kind of make it resemble the actual bedroom a little bit. The position of where the bed is, the nightstand. I got this wrong. There's actually no blood on the pillow. I read that incorrectly. Picture of Lizzie here. The frame is not the same scale, obviously, as the other items, but still cool. I found pictures of Lizzie on the internet and shrunk them down, printed them out, put them in the frames. And so I'm going to try to do this. So here you can see, I'm going to have to turn this around for a minute. So here you can see, kind of see, Abby Borden. She was found face down on the floor. next to the bed, um, and in a pool of blood, and there's actually a little chunk of hair found near her. I even have that in here, although it's huge. It's definitely not to scale, um, but it was actually braided. So, but they did have radiators, so got a little radiator in there, and just like the candles and everything. Um, so she was found on the second floor, guest bedroom, and then I also like I said, I didn't do a very good job. I'm just gonna say that at the time of the murders, the Borden house was in disrepair. They hired some really bad painters or wallpaper hangers or carpenters and did a shoddy job. I'm just going to stick to that story. But it's kind of hard to see, but I put, little shingles on there. Kind of tried to paint it around the same kind of olive drab color that the actual house was. So this is the crime scene of Andrew, the father. He was found first floor sitting room. Let's see this. Okay. So he was found on the couch. I actually had ordered a more appropriate Victorian couch on Etsy, but I ordered that a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, and it still hasn't come. And I guess the guy decided to take a break in the middle. He had too many orders, so it's kind of like, dude, where's my car? But instead it's, dude, where's my couch? So I had to kind of make my own little couch. But I tried to, like I said, tried to kind of put some similar furniture in the areas, the right areas. But this is how he was found, and whereas Abby was hit in the back of the head, around 18 or 19 times. Andrew was hit, in the face and the front of the head, probably from above, like probably, the person stood like right here over him. He was, you know, injured so badly that one of his eyes had been kind of sliced into and was hanging off, which is absolutely horrific. Now, Abby was found to have been killed about an hour and a half or two before Andrew. Her blood had actually congealed by the time they had found her. They think that the second blow may have been the killing blow, and when you think about the person continued to bludgeon or chop, her how many more times, 16 or 17 more times after she was already dead, is just, horrific, or pardon the expression, overkill. So, when they found Andrew, his blood was actually still flowing. It was still fresh. So he hadn't been dead very long. They estimate probably, I believe he was found about 15 minutes after he returned home. And so those are the crime scenes. I'm now going to show you the actual pictures of the crime scene. So, if you're squeamish, turn away, or you can fast forward. So This is Andrew, found in the sitting room, slumped over. They believe that he was attacked in his sleep, and they found his coat jacket, his suit jacket, balled up, kind of at his head. They found this odd because, like I said, he was a very frugal, careful man, and they said that he would usually, um, you know, hang up his suit very neatly. So, wondering if, that was used maybe to. There was one theory that if Lizzie did it, um, she may have used that in some way. Um, but that's how Andrew was found. Let's see. And then this is the way Abby was found. And the bed is right over here. So again, she was attacked from the back, probably while she was, as she was changing the sheets on the bed, and he was attacked, in the front. I also have pictures of their skulls. Oh, actually, here's another picture. This one's pretty horrific. This is the back of Abby's head. Just absolutely horrific. And you can actually see the hatchet marks. I think it's really interesting, though, how this forms a 7. I don't know that there's really anything to that. I mean, I doubt that it could have been planned, but I just find that really weird. So, it's pretty gruesome. And then you can see how damaged the skulls are. Abby's skull and Andrew's skull. This gives you a good picture of, where the perpetrator was probably standing. So it's very informative. The one thing that I find extremely interesting is if Lizzie did it, where was the blood? Where was all the blood? When they found her, the only noticeable area of blood was just a very tiny spot, I believe on her underskirt, and she could have, explained that away, that it was her time of the month. As far as evidence that was found in the basement, they found a hatchet, a handleless hatchet, not unlike this one. It was found in a pail of ashes. And it's kind of interesting because, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Also, there were bloody rags, bloody cloths found in a pail, and Lizzie said that those were her time of the month rags, and back then, men would just take her word for it, and they didn't analyze those rags or anything, which is unfortunate. They did have the handleless hatchet looked at. There was a bit of hair in it, but they said that it was animal hair. I'm thinking that, could have been cleaned. But again, what I find so odd is that there was no blood found on, like, the side of the bedspread where Abby was found. there was blood. I think some blood found on the wall behind Andrew, and then there's some blood supposedly seeped through, I think, onto the wooden floor. But one of my family members in law enforcement who has actually cleaned up blood on crime scenes, he said that blood is very hard to clean. So it's just very odd to me that Lizzie could have done such a good job of cleaning up the blood, but then I guess she did have an hour and a half to 2 hours between, the murder of the stepmother and the father to to clean herself up. It was also theorized that she could have possibly have, just really bizarre, that she could have committed the murders naked or in a towel or using her father's suit coat. I think that's kind of a really bizarre theory, but again, it just floors me that there was no blood on her. Let me know what you think about that. Is it possible that she was really that good and cleaned it up? And then the stomachs of Andrew and Abby were sent off to have them analyzed for poison, and none was found. But I'm wondering, like I said before about morphine and the other drugs, were those found in the stomach? Um, if Abby or if Lizzie had been slowly poisoning them, and since morphine was readily available and given and legal, nobody would have thought any different about it. So I thought that was kind of an interesting theory. That's my own theory, but still. So let's talk about, a little bit more of the evidence. I believe this was not found out for, let's see, let me find this. Okay. Part of the evidence was not found or not determined until I think almost a century later. Okay, so right here, yeah, it said that it would take nearly a century for forensic experts to determine that the hatchet blade that they found down in the basement was actually tied to making shreds in Abby's headscarf. And I'm thinking too, maybe that's why there wasn't a lot of blood splatter, because she was wearing a headscarf at the time. And I don't know when this was found, but it said that they did find a foot-long cylindrical stick in the basement's furnace. And they said that, back then blood could be washed from metal, but not a porous wood like a hatchet handle. And I thought too, maybe they removed it so that there wouldn't be any fingerprints. They did not check for fingerprints because that was kind of a new thing, and they weren't very trusting of it. They were they mentioned something called optography, which is the theory that when someone dies, their retina in their eye takes like a death image, almost like a picture, and it remains there, and you can actually look into someone's eyes and see their killer, which is kind of crazy, but that was back the same time when phrenology was kind of introduced, the theory that criminals had, you could tell a criminal by the shape of his or her skull, the number of bumps and everything. So these were not scientific methods. But I found that very interesting. So, let me make sure I'm talking about all of the evidence. Another thing that was kind of damning is that soon after the murders, Lizzie burned a dress that they said was similar to the one she was wearing on the day of the murder. That she actually burned it in the kitchen stove right there in the kitchen, and she said that there was a paint stain on it, and I guess it wasn't uncommon for them to burn clothes in the stove, but um, again, that's awful suspicious and fishy. So that was kind of damning too. Again, I just want to make sure. Okay, so we have the suspects, Lizzie, John Morse, who his alibi matched up, um, illegitimate son William, who again we don't even know if he really existed, um, a stranger. Um, I believe Lizzie said that she had seen a stranger around the house or around the house that morning. Um, actually, this was a time when um, um, Irish Catholic immigrants or immigrants period, they were not trusted. And so the day after, I believe the day after the murder, an innocent Portuguese man was arrested. And so they thought that a foreigner could have committed the murders. Um, just make sure. So now I'm going to talk about the motives, and especially, with Lizzie, we talked about, the possibility of Andrew, you know, assaulting Bridget the maid, which I don't think was factual. Or, they said that Bridget may have resented being sent out to wash the windows, um, while she was sick and it was hot out. I really don't know that that's enough to make someone want to commit to heinous murders, Um, so let us look at Lizzie's motives. Now, I believe, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that at this time, the older sister, Emma Borden, was actually away visiting friends. Um, but I believe the sisters were starting to, especially Lizzie, were starting to worry about her father's diminishing funds because the sisters would inherit his money, but I believe only after Abby, the stepmother. So, and I found this weird because he was said to be frugal, but they said he had been giving lavish gifts to Abby's family, including her sister. He put one of his houses in her name and was giving them extravagant gifts. And so they said that Lizzie was kind of seeing the inheritance diminish, and they said that it's possible she overheard a conversation between her father and his brother-in-law, where Andrew may have offered to give John Morris, his brother-in-law, money, and her motives would be for money, obviously, because after the death of Abby, all of the money would go to the sisters. Um, and like I said, he was very controlling, and Lizzie wanted to live a different life. Um, so uh, she saw that money just kind of being diminished. Then they talked about, um, you know, her love for animals and the possibility of her father killing the pigeons. Um, but mainly the money. That was the main motive, in the fact that she wanted to live a more extravagant lifestyle. Um, so, let's see. Go down here. And then, like I said, my theory is maybe, uh, you know, one of the drugs that she was on caused her to be aggressive, and I thought maybe a combination of the heat, um, of her time of the month, and what was the other thing I said? Just her resentment of her stepmother and her desire to inherit that money was enough to spurn her into action. So, Lizzie was the primary suspect. She was actually arrested and she spent 9 months in jail before the trial. And they said that, these murders were done in broad daylight on a busy street, with people passing by. And, it would have been very hard for someone to kind of sneak in and out unnoticed and covered in blood. Um, so she was the main suspect. Um, Now, this was one of the first trials that was really sensationalized by the newspapers. This was like the O.J. Simpson trial, akin to the O.J. Simpson trial. Um, Everybody was interested in it, and also because it involved a woman of wealth, one of the wealthiest families in the area. So people flocked, to the trial, and of course they were able to um, hire a very good lawyer, and the jury, they were all men, and some of them had uh, daughters around Lizzie's age, and like I said, there was this. They were Protestant, and they were all Protestant, and there was this great mistrust between Irish Catholics. So they think the jury may have kind of bonded with her. Another thing that I found interesting, because I did a little video about Amber Heard and how she was dressed during the trial between her and Johnny Depp. Um, I'm going to read what this says to you um, about the trial. I found it really interesting. Let's see. Okay, so it said here um, that Lizzie was not a helpless maiden. She only needed to present herself as one in the court. Her lawyers told her to dress in black. She appeared in court, tightly corseted, dressed in flowing clothes, and holding a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a fan in the other. And apparently she supposedly fainted when they brought the skulls in for evidence. It says one newspaper described her as quiet, modest, and well-bred, far from a brawny, big, muscular, hard-faced, coarse-looking girl. Another stressed that she lacked Amazonian proportions. She could not possess the physical strength, let alone the moral degeneracy, to wield a weapon with skull-cracking force. I actually watched kind of a recreation of the murders where they they made bodies out of this gel and other material that's very close to a human body. And they had a woman who wrote a book about Lizzie Borden. I actually started to listen to it on Audible. So they gave her a hatchet and had her try to recreate, the blows to see if she would be strong enough to uh, to commit these murders. And yes, she was. I mean, I don't really think that it takes a lot of strength to deliver a killing blow with a hatchet. Um, you know, so yes, a woman could very well commit those murders. I tried to get measurements of how big Lizzie was, and I believe different resources had different measurements, but the one that I kept seeing was they said she was about 5'4" and maybe 135 pounds. So, and you think about, rage and how if you're in a state of rage, how adrenaline's going to be coursing through your body, and you're probably going to be even stronger in that moment. So yes, it was very possible that a woman did it. But strangely enough, she was acquitted, and I guess before I started to research this case, I did not realize that. And I think a lot of people just assumed she was guilty, especially, with the children's rhyme and everything, but she was actually acquitted. Um, just want to make sure that I covered everything that I wanted to cover. Um, but yeah, she was acquitted, and she and her sister did inherit the money shortly after they moved to the hill, just as Lizzie wanted, and they bought a very nice house and called it Maplecroft. I always want to say Maplethorpe. Maplecroft. Lizzie hired drivers to drive her around. She went to and from New York to see Broadway shows, and I believe she even had some of the actors to the house, invited them. And then at one point, she and her sister had some kind of falling out. In around 1907, her older sister Emma moved out. And I wanted to mention that even though Lizzie was acquitted, she was still shunned. The kids would make fun of her. They made up the rhyme and everything. One thing I found interesting is in 1897, Lizzie was arrested for shoplifting in Rhode Island, even though she had all of that money. And remember, she, how she had gone into her father and her stepmother's bedroom and taken money and, a jewelry. It makes me wonder, did she steal things from the drugstore that we don't know about? She tried to secure some prussic acid, but wasn't able to. But maybe she stole something else while she was there. So I found that really odd that maybe she was kind of pathological. Kind of had some mental issues. Um, so her sister ended up dying. This was interesting too. They both died in 1927, which I found very interesting, especially since they were no longer in touch with anyone. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you my opinion of whether or not I think Lizzie was guilty, and I do think she was guilty, for many of the reasons that were mentioned. Motive, she had the opportunity. Uh, More than that, it had to be someone who knew the house. Just like, my theory with in the John Benet Ramsey case, it had to be someone who intimately knew that house. Uh, because how would a stranger know uh, the layout of the house and where everybody was? And a stranger certainly wouldn't have wandered down into the basement on their own and, um, hoping they would find somewhere to deposit the murder weapon. That just doesn't seem likely. So, yes, I absolutely believe that she was guilty. I do wonder, though, if her older sister was aware of her plans to murder their father and stepmother. That's something that probably will never be proven, but I think that's a distinct possibility. Uh, and I did kind of have that theory that maybe Emma had come back during that time and helped Lizzie clean up or committed one of the murders. It's just a thought. Emma was only 15 minutes away at Friends, so I wonder if there was any collusion there. So tell me what you think about that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you learned some things. Um, I am going to be actually using Lizzie Borden again in my next Haunted or Not video. The Borden house is now used as a bed and breakfast. You can go stay there. They actually have some of the artifacts on display, including, I think they've taken the skulls off display because it was a bit disturbing, but they still have the handleless hatchet and I believe some of Lizzie's clothing. So, and people have reported some very weird paranormal activity. So I will be using Lizzie again for um, my haunted series, and then the next topic that I'm going to talk about in my next crime video is the history of poison. Kind of, in researching this case, talking about the prussic um, uh, acid and other possible poisons. I thought that might be an interesting topic and one that I've not really seen a lot of information about. So I will be doing that next. But thank you for watching, and let me know what you think about this case in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. And if there's a case or anything having to do with crime that you would like me to research and do a video of, please let me know. So thanks again.